Hello again, everyone. Thanks for starting to watch the video. Hope you are all safe and well. So today I'm going to do a video of a bit of a rebuild. At the moment, this is my sort of second car, and this has got the carbon chassis on it. And I've been waiting for the alloy ones to come in. And that came in earlier this week from Schumacher. Obviously they're still trading, service is always really good, and the parts come out really quickly. So this is part number U7995. So this is the alloy chassis. So what I'm going to do is get the car all stripped down, and as I rebuild it, go through a few little building tips. The chassis are exactly the same. Obviously it's just the material, and they offer slightly different handling characteristics, but I'm preferring the alloy one, and that's why I'm changing it over. There is a bit of a difference in weight, and I'll go through how we can try and get it as close to the 730 minimum limit as possible by using different parts, etc. So next time you see this car, it will be all in its component parts. I try to take it off in sections, so the front end will come off in a section, the pod, and then all the other little bits. And then as I rebuild it up, I'll show you again some of just the little, not secrets, but just things we've learned as we've been running the car. One thing I always do when I'm doing a rebuild, from when I strip it down and then rebuild it, is make sure the chassis is flat. Because if you start, when you built it and you start to find this, it's tweaked somehow. If you've checked the chassis is flat, you know it's flat. If you haven't checked the chassis is flat, you might struggle later. So that's just getting the setup board out and just making sure it's absolutely bob on, which obviously this, fresh out the packet, and Schumacher quality products, it's gonna be. So I'm gonna crack on getting this stripped down, and then when the video starts again, you'll see all the component parts, and then we'll start to rebuild. So it's all stripped down, sort of in the order I did it. So wheels, axle, bumper, damper tubes, top deck, side links, spring hanger, front end. Obviously I've took the front end off as one complete bit, because I know I rebuilt it recently. Pivot bits, obviously the chassis. I've taken the pod apart. Just thought I'd go through rebuilding the pod, and then there's obviously some bits and bobs that the battery stop, and then you've got the electrics at the top there. So just going to tidy things up a little bit, and then first thing I'm going to do is I'll get some bits and bobs put onto the chassis, and then I'll show you how I go about rebuilding the pod, getting the pod nice and square. So I've decided just to build it as per manual, and then at least there's a logical way people can follow it through if they are building the car for the first time. So this is about somewhere between step 1 and step 2. One of the things I just wanted to mention was the battery stop. So sorry, I'm not used to this handheld slot. So we've got lots of little holes, and you can move it into the position, and then you've got a little battery stop on the spring hanger as well, which you move to keep the LiPo secure. Now, a few of us, or most of us, have had issues where we've finished a run, and if we had a shunt, the battery stop has moved. So I've just took, you might be able to see that, that's the side that goes on the chassis, and that's the side that goes on the top. So I've just took that shininess off, just to create a little bit more friction. But just watch out for it. It is something that if somebody has found a better solution, make a note in the comments and I'll try and pass it on to the team. But that's one of the things to look out for. Right, I'm going to carry on building and then we'll do the pod. So, rebuilding a pod. This is from scratch or a rebuild or whenever really. So the first thing to do is, if you're in a rush at trackside, obviously you see people and to some degree, you know, the pod's tweaked, you loosen the screws off and you tighten it back up again and you check it, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But obviously if it's always going out of tweak, there might be some issue with one of the parts being bent. Now we've got a carbon pod plate on the bottom, so that should be pretty good, but always give it a check. Seems quite good. Make sure your bore's not got bits of jam on. Yeah, and then you check the bore ends as well. So you're making sure that they're not twisted. So if you're holding it at one end, you shouldn't be able to hear anything. If it's, I'll try and, it's making a tapping noise. Could be that the thing's twisted and that's causing the pod to twist when you do the final tightening up. So then, if everything's nice and square, then you can start building it up. So there's two sizes of screws, and I always remember it like a mullet, long at the back and short on the front. So the longer ones get the right size screwdriver. And when I'm first doing it, I'm just getting them not even really tied, just in place really. Okay, so once we've got them in this sort of, just again, when you're checking it, you're holding around one corner and you're seeing if it's twisted. Now, do it in a cross pattern, so that one, that one, that one, and that one. You're checking to make sure it's not, again, if it's doing, I'll try and artificially do it. If there's something like that, it means probably it's twisted somewhere. And then again, it's the same with the brace at the back.
Just get it so it's just not really tight.
Always nervous about building it incorrectly and looking like a bit of a twonk when I'm doing these videos. And then again, hold. You can use a screwdriver or something to do this, so you've got nice and even pressure across. And then again, tighten up in a cross pattern. And that's the pod rebuilt, all nice and square. Just be careful with the car. These screws, especially that one, I don't know why, me and my friend Ashley King always seem to get that one to come loose. I always have always Loctite those. I tend to Loctite most of my screws anyway. Not ridiculous, just a little bit, just to create a little bit of something for it to sort of grip onto, especially with the titanium one. Titanium ones have just had a head come off one of the screws, and I've just replaced them with steel ones. They are a bit of a pain, titanium, but sometimes you need to use them to keep the weight of the car down. The only other thing to go on here is the pivot now. I have got the alloy pivot bits, top and bottom. They are sold separately, but you really need to buy them as a pair. And I'm going to get these side links on, and I'm just going to go through a couple of little bits with you on those. So I'm going to stop the video again and just go through the side links. So the side links, if it's a brand new kit, when we were building it up, a few of us noticed that it was quite tight and it was binding on these sides here. So what I did when I built it up, this is without the screw in, what we did was, or what I did, avoid going into there, but just get if you can see that, and just open up the hole slightly, and then when you're fitting the screw, when you're doing it up, you don't want to be closing that gap, so it's just so it touches. Don't put any more, so it's just have a look in the light, make sure the screw just touches, and then stop. And then the other thing with this new car is the pivot, and it's got the little little screw there. Again, when you first build it up, a little bit of Loctite on the screw, and then tighten it up, and then I'll show you when the side links are on, but you can you don't want any play, but you don't want it to bind. It's just right. So maybe tighten it, feel if you've got a bit of play, tighten it a bit more, a bit of play. And then when you've got the side links on, there shouldn't be any play at all. It should just be nice and loose. So I'm going to get the side links on and show you how it should sort of behave without any sort of binding on it. So again, just look at the manual. This is basically the end of step 5, and it does say there at the bottom, adjust all of the points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it moves freely, and you can see it's not binding at all. It just moves back and it sort of rotates. And then get the pod, and then you're moving it across, and you shouldn't feel any movement there. If it is, you just need to tighten the little screw. Sorry, you shouldn't feel any movement sort of side to side, but everything should sort of flop around quite nicely. So that's step 5. Some of the next steps I've already got built up. The spring hanger. One of the things I will say is you can use this to reduce some of the weight by not having the battery stop. So you save yourself a little bit of weight there. And you can remove the brass inserts, or obviously not fit the brass inserts. To get the brass inserts out, you just use a 2mm driver and sort of wiggle them out. So that's one way of getting, if you start weighing, start doing loads of little bits, it'll all add up, and you should be able to get it down to weight. So, but this is going to be a club car, and I'm not bothered about it being bang on the 730. But my other car, that's what I've done. Obviously, if you don't have that though, you will need to run lipo tape, or what some people were doing is leaving some sticky tape on the chassis and then using the O-ring to sort of fix it down to it, which I think they were finding it quite successful. Obviously, you might be replacing the sticky tape depending on how good the sticky tape is. Also, you want something that's really, really thin as well, because you don't want to raise that centre of gravity of probably the heaviest part of the car, the lipo. So again, if you're struggling to get the weight down on the car and you're a bit obsessed, as some 12 racers tend to be, you can remove that and just use lipo. So again, I'm going to carry on building, and if I come to any bits that I think we need to chat about, we'll go through that. But I think everything's pretty straightforward, so it might look pretty built the next time the video goes on. Everything's nearly back in the car. All looks absolutely fine. There wasn't really any steps there that needed any more detail on. There are some other videos with sort of ride. I'm not going to go through ride height with this because it's another video in another video, and it is pretty straightforward to do. So the only thing left to do now is to get the electrics in the car, and obviously the motor, we can only put that in one position to some degree. You can get motor spacers from Schumacher that you can move the motor to try and balance the pod. But I know with this motor, I need it as far over as possible anyway. Moving it this way, which is obviously the only way we can do it, just creates more imbalance. So the movable bits are obviously the speedo and your receiver. Now, because I've already built this car up before, I sort of know ballpark where I'm going to put it. So at the moment, I've got no damper tubes on and no springs on the car, so it's all very. You can detect whether the car's balanced very easily. So I'm going to get the electrics in. I'm going to put them where I think they're going to go, and then we'll check the balance of the car. And hopefully, when we do the sort of the balance check with the pennies and lift the car up, it should be perfectly balanced, so the weight is distributed evenly. And then at that point, then I'll put the springs on, and visually I'll wind them down so they're just touching the pod plate. And then again, that should, if I lift the car up again, it should be perfectly balanced. So one of the things that I personally noticed with this car is that the speedo, obviously that's significantly heavier than the receiver. It wants to be as far over as possible, and in my cars now, this freaks some people out. I'll try and see if I can get a better angle for you. So you end up angling it in to try and get more weight over, and this sort of freaks people out somewhat. However, if it's straight like that, there's two things that can happen. The wire, it's a very small chance that it could rub on the underside of that, but nobody sees the speedo when it's going around the track. So I'll probably set it up like that. I know I'm not going to have to add any weight to this. Obviously, if I was adding weight to it, you could just put it straight, if you a bit OCD about it, the speedo being straight, and then you could add weight in other places. But I know that this is going to be at 730 overweight, so I don't want to be adding any more weight to get it balanced. The other thing as well with these XR10 speedos is that you don't need to have the wire going over the top. If you lay the cable underneath, by the time you put your double-sided sticky tape, it's not going to interfere at all, and it just keeps everything nice and tidy. If you look at somebody's car and the wiring's all over the place, it just shows that maybe they could spend a bit more time in the car. However, it's not essential. It just, again, it's one of my probably things I like to have, a nice tidy wiring. I know some people would even just change the wiring so it's all black. Again, I'm not that OCD about it. So again, I'm going to get the motor screwed in, get a pinion on it, double-sided sticky tape, the speedo, and the receiver, and then get a battery in it, and we'll see if it balances. So that got a bit emotional there. It's about 2 hours later. I had some food, but just couldn't get it balanced. Ended up with the the speedo really angled over to try and get it as much as possible, and I've turned the receiver on its side, so obviously more of the weight's towards the edge. So there's no springs and no dampers on it, and in theory this is how you want to get it so it's as balanced as possible. And I had one of the battery connectors come off as well, just to add to the misery. Just going to go through with the Eclipse 3. A lot of 12 cars you see, the angle of the steering arms is absolutely straight. With the Eclipse, I think you should be able to see there's a little bit, so the balls here are not in the line, they're slightly forward. That's about what you want to get. However, the arms should be level. You don't want that to be up or down. You want all those in that line, you want them to all be level, and you can use that by just putting little spaces underneath the studs there. I've got one of these Sanwa servo mounts. It just lifts it off the chassis so that the servo saver doesn't protrude through the chassis. I'm going to give out those part numbers and stuff at the end of the video. So we're nearly there. So now it's just a case of putting the springs on, and then I'll wind them down and get it balanced again, and then put the damper tubes on, just check it again. The ride height is not bang on, but it is level all the way over, so it's the same height on all the corners. It just needs to go down a little bit on that. So yeah, that's it now. I'm gonna do that, and when I come back we'll just finish off, and I'll go through all the part numbers and all the sort of hop up parts that you can put on the car if needed. Okay. So we're all done that now. I've done the ride height. The only thing I haven't done is just put the setup gauge on this sort of thing. You can check your toe in and toe out. I know that the it was all right, so I just need to get it on there and just get it set up. So that's the only other thing I need to do. So took a bit longer than normal. I'm happy with it. With these little screws that we use to adjust the springs, I always aim, if it's any more than 0.5 mm difference between the two, that's when I feel that something's wrong, it's tweaked or something. And I'd say there's about 0.2 mm difference between the two. So although the weight isn't perfect, I can live with it on there. And what I'll do, obviously after I've run it a few times and I've checked the tweak during that, I'll just next time I'm sort of rebuilding it or just giving it a bit of a clean, I'll check everything over again. So that's the car built there. The extra bits and bobs that I've got on it, just wanted to go through that. So it's got the 1.5 degree camber strap, which is part number U7935. The Sanwa servo spacer, only necessary if you've got a Sanwa servo, and that's product U7680. the alloy pivot mount, which is U7918 and U7919. You need both of the parts on that. That's the mount and the block. The alloy chassis, as mentioned earlier, was U7995. I've used the MR33 double-sided tape. This is really good stuff. It doesn't leave horrible residue on. Horrible residue on. It's sort of see-through, and it's just and it also sticks everything to the car really well. And the code for that is MR33 tape. So I've just weighed the car with a shell, obviously battery, as it would go on the track, and we're at 760, so we're 30 grams over. Now there are a number of screws here that aren't titanium, so one of the things that I'll be doing over the next day or so, just polishing it off, is changing all the screws I can do to titanium. So that'll be these top ones. I might change a few of the bottom ones, but the ones I wouldn't change are these four here and those two there and those two there, because he's got that's where he's got things mounted to it there. So, but I'll change as many as I can to get the weight down, because I've got quite a few titanium screws. As I mentioned earlier, we could remove the battery stop, and that's probably another 4 or 5 grams. The Trinity X Factor motor isn't the lightest one. The Hobbywing G3R is lighter by about, I think it's 8 or 9 grams. If you run a spool, that's about 10 grams. The other thing that I've done on my other car is put these on. If you can't read that, it's CR280 titanium ball studs. Just forgot the ball studs. They need shortening, and you can use a set of these where you screw the ball stud into there and then chop it. I got these from, I think it was Screwfix or something like that, hardware store, what are you going to call it. Okay, now there are there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 in total, and I think it's about half a gram a ball stud. So there's another 5 grams there. So you can get them down to weight. These are, I've got quite big tyres on here as well at the moment, which can make a difference. I think I'll be able to get off another maybe 10 grams just by some titanium screws and some ball studs. And obviously you don't want to get it to 730 with a diff, and then when you put a spool in it's 720 and then you start to add weight, which can confuse the issue a little bit. I feel like I'm waffling on a bit, so I'm going to sort of draw it to a close. Please use the comment section. If you like the video, like the video. If you want to subscribe, subscribe. If you want to see anything in particular that I've not covered already, just drop me a message. And hopefully we'll be back racing soon, so might see people at the track. Stay safe, stay healthy, and see you soon.